How about by raking his shoulder in a frenzy of passion? Could that produce skin beneath the fingernails? With a grin at the jury, he took Chris's hands and settled them on his waist. Talented, beautiful, what else could you possibly want in a child? Life, Melanie said coldly. You killed her, Melanie shouted, Puckett yelled, banging his gavel. She pinned Chris with her gaze. She's given him the death stare. But you couldn't keep her from bruising when she fought. Objection, Your Honor, this is inappropriate. I think he killed her. Welcome back to another episode of our book club series. If you're new here and you don't know who I am, my name is Brooke. I have different types of content on my channel. What you are watching right now is a continuation of our book club series. We read chapters of the book together and then we discuss the characters, the drama, and our theories about what we think might happen. So if you enjoy books and book discussions, then stick around because you will definitely enjoy this type of content. If you want to catch up to where we're at right now in the book and the discussion, there is a playlist on my channel called Book Club The Pact. I will link that up here for you to find that. Or if you prefer to just watch the last few videos leading up to this one and jump in from there, you're welcome to do that as well. However you choose to catch up, we would love to have you join in with us. I always do a quick recap of the last few sentences we read in the last video, just so that everybody's up to speed and we all know what's going on. Other than that, today is reading number 24, I believe. I believe I can fly. I'll know when I edit this and post it later for sure on that. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Let's see where we ended last time, shall we? When we ended last time, I'll set the scene for us. It's the first day of the trial. Barry Delaney, the prosecutor, she's just used Chris as a dummy for the demonstration of the murder. So she made Chris in the courtroom during this trial come up in front of everyone, proceeded to demonstrate how she think that he committed the murder. And she made Chris be the one to do it with her. Anyways, so that's when we left off. The prosecutor has just told Chris to go and sit back down after basically humiliating him. So Chris goes to sit back down and he's pissed. He's like, I can't believe this bitch just did this to me, basically. And Jordan, so we're picking back up and Jordan is like, don't worry, I'm going to take care of it on the cross. Talking about the cross-examination. He stood, assuming that after that debacle, that there was little else that Delaney could want with her witness, but was stopped by her voice. So Jordan had thought that Barry was done questioning this doctor after her little demonstration. He thought, surely to God, she's done questioning this doctor now, right? She's done with this witness. It's my turn. Please, can we move the fuck on? Because Chris is humiliated and pissed off, his client, Chris. And now, of course, Jordan is pissed off because his client is, everybody's pissed off except for Barry because she's like, nailed it. So Jordan stands. He stood, assuming that after that debacle, there was little else that Delaney could want with her witness, but was stopped by her voice. So she speaks up and he realizes, fuck, she's not done yet. One more question, Barry said. Was there anything else about Emily's physical condition that you noticed during the autopsy? Yes, Dr. Lumbano said. On the night Emily Gold died, she was 11 weeks pregnant. Jordan closed his eyes and sat back down. We are moving on to the next section. We all appreciate you being here today, Dr. Lumbano, Jordan said a few minutes later. And we all know you've worked on 38 suicides. We heard you say that there was evidence of semen, evidence of bruising, and skin beneath Emily's fingernails. Now, let's put that into perspective. The semen, that shows there was intercourse, right? Yes. Do you know whether or not Emily bruised easily? No, Dr. Lumbano said. Aside from the fact that she was rather fair, which suggests she might bruise easily. Could these bruises have occurred during... He coughed delicately and smiled at the jury. A particularly ardent point in intercourse? They could have, the medical examiner said, straight-faced. And the skin beneath the fingernails, doctor. Is it possible that you can get someone's skin cells beneath your fingernails by gently scratching his back? Yes. How about by raking his shoulder in a frenzy of passion? Could that produce skin beneath the fingernails? Absolutely. And what if you caressed someone's cheek and jaw? Okay, sorry. How about by raking his shoulder in a frenzy of passion? Could that produce skin beneath the fingernails? Absolutely. And what if you caressed someone's cheek and jaw? It's possible. So you're telling me that there are oh my God, help me. So you're telling me that there are a number of different ways that Emily could have Chris's skin under her fingernails, and that many of those different ways could be consistent with non-violent, passionate lovemaking. Is that right? Yes. You can't tell me with any certainty that there was any violence that night between Emily and Chris, can you? No, not precisely, but there was a bullet wound in the victim's head. Well, no shit, we all know that. Ah, yes, Jordan said. We all saw what Miss Delaney did with Chris, but a lot of things could have happened that night, right? Let's work through a couple of other scenarios to see how else that wound might have been inflicted. He turned suddenly toward his client. Chris, if you don't mind, again, this is making Chris come back up to the stand in front of everybody. Well, not to the stand, but making him come to the front of the courtroom and stand in front of everyone. Chris is probably like cursing underneath his breath right now, like, you motherfucker. Chris, if you don't mind, again, like, bewildered, Chris stood up and walked towards Jordan, to almost exactly the same spot where the prosecutor had brought him before. Then Jordan walked over to the exhibit table and picked up the gun. All right if I use this? Without waiting to see if Barry had agreed, he casually carried the pistol back toward Chris. Now, with a grin at the jury, he took Chris's hands and settled them on his waist. This is funny shit. So now, Jordan's got Chris up there, and he puts Chris's hands on his own waist. This is just funny. All right. Now, with a grin at the jury, he took Chris's hands and settled them on his waist. You're going to have to use your imaginations here, because I don't make quite as convincing a female as Miss Delaney. He nodded to Chris, whose neck turned crimson as he loosely embraced Jordan. There was a murmur in the gallery as Jordan pressed the gun up against his own head. He smiled, knowing he'd just presented the jury with an even more shocking mental image than the one of Chris with Barry Delaney. What if, Doctor, Emily was holding the gun like this, like someone would normally hold a gun? But since she had no experience with guns, she sort of twisted the barrel toward her. Leaning back slightly in Chris's arms, Jordan directed the gun at his temple in the same uncomfortable angle the medical examiner had positioned it earlier. If the gun was up against her head like this, would the bullet trajectory have been consistent with what you found in the autopsy? Yes, I believe so. Doctor, what if she was holding the gun like this, to the side of her temple, like all those other 10% pistol suicides you've seen? But then her hand was shaking so badly that it jumped as she pulled the trigger. Is it possible the trajectory might change? It is possible. And what if Emily was so uncomfortable with the very idea of holding a gun that she picked it up like this? He wrapped both hands around the barrel of the gun and held it up to his head, almost parallel against his temple, thumbs dangling at the trigger. If she'd held the gun like this and used her thumb to pull the trigger, could the bullet match that odd trajectory? Yes. So, you're saying, Doctor, that there are a variety of possibilities that might have accounted for the strange path of that bullet. I suppose so. And Dr. Lumbano, Jordan finished, turning in his client's embrace, in any of these alternative scenarios, have you seen Christopher Hart's hands on the trigger of that gun? No. Jordan broke away from Chris and set the gun back on the exhibit table, his fingers resting on the metal for a moment. Thank you, he said. All right, and now we are moving on to another section. So, let's do that. The bleached blonde on the witness stand looked longingly at the jar of almonds in front of the judge and raised her hand. Startled, Barry looked up from her notes. Yes? I was wondering if he can have those. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if I could just have a little piece of gum. I mean, I know what you said and all, but since a cigarette's out of the question, and I'm a little freaked out about this whole thing. She blinked owlishly at the prosecutor. So? To everyone's surprise, Judge Puckett laughed. Miss de Bonnelow, he said. Just maybe, Miss de Bonnelow, he said. I'll take you up on that cigarette. He signaled a bailiff to carry the jar of nuts toward the witness. I'm afraid that chewing gum might make your testimony hard to understand, but I'm willing to share. The woman relaxed a little, until she realized there was nothing to crack the nuts with. But by that time, Barry was ready to question her witness. She's like, oh, fuck. Well, a lot of good that did. But by that time, Barry was ready to question her witness. Could you state your name, address, and occupation for the record? Donna de Bonnelow, she said loudly into the microphone. 456 Rosewood Bay, Bainbridge, and I work at the Gold Rush. What sort of establishment is the Gold Rush? A jewelry store, Donna said. Did you ever come in contact with Emily Gold? Yes, she came into the store to buy a birthday present for her boyfriend. A watch. She wanted to have it engraved. I see. What did she want engraved on it? The name Chris, Donna said, her eyes sliding toward the defense table. And how much did it cost? $500. Wow, Barry said. $500. That's a lot of money for a 17-year-old. It's a lot of money for anyone. But she said she was really excited about it. Hearsay, Jordan objected. Sustained. Did she tell you why she was making the purchase? Barry asked. Donna nodded. She said that the watch was for her boyfriend's 18th birthday. Did she leave any specific instructions? Yes. They were written on the receipt. If we had to call her to tell her anything about the watch, like when it came in, we were only supposed to ask for Emily and say nothing about the jewelry store or the watch. Did she tell you why she wanted to keep it a secret? She said it was going to be a surprise. Again, Jordan called. Hearsay. The judge nodded. Approached the bench. Jordan and Barry stood shoulder to shoulder, jockeying for position. Either you find another way to get that in, Puckett told the prosecutor, or it's stricken from the record. Barry nodded and turned back to her witness as Jordan sat down again. Let me rephrase that, she said. What exactly did those instructions say? Donna furrowed her brow, thinking. Call to the house, ask for Emily. This is private. Don't say what it's about. Did Emily tell you when her boyfriend's birthday was? Yeah, because we had to get it done in time. It came special ordered from London. We had to have it finished by November. Any specific date? Well, the watch was supposed to be engraved with the birthday, too. November 24th. She wanted me to have it in the store by November 17th, to give us a week just in case anything went wrong, because she planned to give it to him on the 24th. Barry leaned against the jury box. Were you expecting Emily to pick up that watch on November 17th? Oh, yeah. Did she? No. Did you find out why not? Donna de Bonnelow nodded gravely. She died the week before. Do y'all see where Barry's going with this? All right, let's talk about it. Emily wouldn't have been planning to off herself if she was also planning to be here for Chris's birthday, right? And spend all this money and do all the, go through all this effort to get this fancy watch for Chris's birthday if she was planning to not be here on Chris's birthday because she would have offed herself. So Barry is insinuating that Emily never had planned to do this to herself. Donna de Bonnelow nodded gravely. She died the week before. And now we're moving on to the next section. Jordan sat at the defense table for a minute after the witness had been turned over to his cross-examination. There wasn't a hell of a lot he was going to get out of her. He stood up slowly, knees creaked. Miss de Bonnelow, he said pleasantly, when did Emily Gold place her order? On August 25th. And was that the first time you saw her? No. She'd come in to look around about a week before. Did she pay you when she placed the order? Yes, in full. How did she seem to you when you met her in August? Happy? Cheerful? Sure. She was psyched about finding the watch as a birthday present. When did the watch come in, Miss de Bonnelot? On November 17th, she smiled. Nothing went wrong. Depends on your point of view, Jordan thought. But he smiled back evenly. And when did you call the Gold household? On November 17th, for the first time. So you had no contact with Emily between August 25th and November? No. When you called the Gold house, what kind of response did you get? Well, actually, her mother was really rude to me. At this point, I think she was dead, right? So she probably was not in the best mood. I'd say. Yeah, that's why she was such a bitch, because her fucking daughter was dead. Okay, sorry. Jordan nodded sympathetically. How many times did you have to call? 3, Donna sniffed. On the third time, did you finally tell Miss Gold about the watch? Yeah, after she told me that her daughter was dead. I was shocked. So Emily seemed perfectly happy in August, and then you didn't have any contact with her until November, which was when you found out she had died. Yeah, Donna said. Jordan slid his hands into his pockets. It looked like a pointless cross. But he knew better. He'd used the testimony in his closing to point out that 3 short months before her death, Emily Gold did not appear suicidal. In fact, it might have been fairly sudden, which was only a short step away from explaining why Emily's teachers, her friends, her own mother hadn't seen it coming. That's all, ma'am, Jordan said, and sank back into his chair. Next section. Judge Puckett's scheduled dental cleaning brought the testimony to an end shortly after 2 o'clock. Jurors were dismissed with a reminder not to speak about the case to anyone. Witnesses who had not yet been called to the stand were told to return tomorrow at 9 a.m., and Chris was handcuffed again and led to the sheriff's offices in the basement of the courthouse. James met Gus in the lobby of the courthouse. He knew that legally he was not supposed to talk to his wife about what had transpired in the courtroom that day. He also knew that Gus would not let a little thing like the justice system stop her from finding out how the trial was going so far. So he was surprised when Gus fell into step beside him, deep in thought and oddly silent. It was raining outside. I'll get the car, James said, with a glance at Gus's high heels. You wait here. She nodded, standing with her hand pressed up against the wide glass window of the entrance as James leaped over the puddles. At the feel of a hand on her upper arm, Gus whirled around. Hi, Michael said, his touch making her skin tingle and making her want to draw away at the same time. She forced herself to smile. You look as bad as I feel. Thanks a lot. Gus watched James unlock the car door. I saw you with Melanie. They'd been sitting in the lobby, sequestered as she was, a few rows away. Michael placed his hand against the window beside Gus's. It's hard, isn't it, trying to imagine what's going on inside? Gus didn't answer. In the parking lot, the Volvo pulled out of its spot. Tomorrow, he said, let's wait together. She did not let herself look at him. I have to go, she said, and she ran into the chill of the rain. So far, the only thing that has transpired between Gus and Michael was that kiss that Michael planted on Gus. I'm trying to remember were they at the gravesite? I think they were at the gravesite. At that memorial situation that they had when they got the new stone. Right? And I think that was the only thing, like, so far, at least, that has physically happened between Gus and Michael. So, and now she's pulling back because who knows? We don't know what Gus is thinking. Maybe it'll tell us, but it seems like she's gotten really cold, like ever since the beginning of the trial. It says she did not let herself look at him. I have to go, she said, and she ran into the chill of the rain. So she's like not having it anymore. All right, next section. Selena hurried through the door while Jordan shook out the umbrella they'd been sharing. Got to get a bigger one of those, she laughed, her hair soaked. Got to get a smaller investigator, Jordan countered, grinning at Selena. It took me years to find an umbrella that I liked. They stumbled together from the small mud-room vestibule into the living room, where Thomas was watching with his arms crossed. Well? He demanded. Selena grinned. Your dad's a master, she said. A wide smile split Thomas's face. Knew it, he said. He high-fived Jordan and flopped onto an overstuffed chair. This means you're in a good mood, right? Why? Jordan answered guardedly. What did you do? Nothing, Thomas said, affronted. I'm just hungry is all. Can we order a pizza? At 3:30? Isn't that early for dinner? Call it a snack, Thomas suggested. Jordan rolled his eyes and walked into the kitchen, still wearing his Macintosh. Get a snack out of the refrigerator, he said, swinging the door of the appliance door open. Oh, or maybe not, he said, throwing a saran-wrapped package into the trash. Isn't there anything else in here? Beer, Thomas said. And milk. Everything else is growing penicillin. And milk. Everything else is growing penicillin. Selena slung her arm around Thomas's thin shoulders. You want pepperoni or sausage? Anything but anchovies, Thomas said. You going to call? Selena nodded. I'll let you know when the pizza gets here. Thomas, taking his cue, retreated into his room. Selena reached past Jordan into the refrigerator and pulled out a beer. Consider yourself lucky he didn't just drink these. You want one? Jordan looked at his watch, thought better of it, and then watched Selena wrench the twist-off top from her bottle. Sure, he said. They settled down in the living room after calling the pizza place. Jordan took a long pull of beer and winced. What I really need, he said, is Tylenol. Here, Selena said, patting her lap. Lie down. Jordan and Selena are getting cozy. Don't look at me like that. He did, gratefully, setting his bottle of Samuel Adams on the floor. Selena's long fingers brushed the hair off his forehead and sleeked over his temples like waterfalls. You're being awfully accommodating, he murmured. Selena gently rapped his skull. Gotta keep that brilliance flowing. He closed his eyes, letting her hands travel over the pulse points. When Selena stopped, he reached up and touched her wrist, urging her on, and immediately pictured Barry Delaney lifting Chris's hand to her own temple. Jordan groaned, his headache returning with a vengeance. If he was still thinking of that, what could he expect of the jury? Next section. Chris was strip searched, his good clothes taken away for safekeeping until the next morning. Poor Chris. As he pulled the drawstring pants on and the soft short-sleeved shirt, he relaxed. These clothes, worn and faded and smelling of gel, were 1,000 times more comfortable than the restricting pleated pants and noosed necktie he'd been forced to wear all day. But then again, it had been several months. Oh shit, so he's been in jail for 7 months now. Today, he'd discovered that there were many things he was unaccustomed to. Direct sunlight, human contact, even Pepsi. The can that Jordan had bought for him, the drink he'd craved so badly for so long, had fizzed up in his stomach and given him the runs. Chris crawled into his bunk. Poor Chris. Chris crawled into his bunk with the unwelcome realization that even if he was given leave to rejoin the world, he might no longer fit in. All right, next section. In the middle of the night, with the shades drawn and the bedroom an airless cocoon, Gus turned to James. Like her, he'd been lying in bed, perfectly still, as if immobility might seg into sleep. But Gus knew that he was every bit as awake as she was. She took a deep breath, but thankful for the darkness that kept her from seeing his face and knowing whether or not he was lying. James, she said, is it going to be all right? He did not pretend to misunderstand, but beneath the covers, blindly reached for her and covered her hand. I don't know, he said. Next section. We're jumping around again. The next morning, Jordan showered and shaved and dressed. He walked into the kitchen, his mind already running through his cross-examinations for the day. Heather Burns, a friend of Emily's, he could do in his sleep. Melanie Gold was a different story. It was not until he sat down that he noticed Thomas smiling at him from across the table. And at his place, a clean bowl and spoon, a jug of milk, and a brand new box of Cocoa Krispies. It's gonna be a good day for Jordy. Jordy Cakes is gonna have a good day because he's got his Cocoa Krispies. Heather Burns trembled so badly on the witness stand that the slightly uneven legs of the chair beat a quick tattoo on the floor. Seeking to put the girl at ease, Barry Delaney walked toward her, blocking out Heather's view of everything but Barry herself. "Relax, Heather," she said in an undertone. "Remember, we've already been through all the questions." Heather nodded bravely, and her face stark white. "Heather," Barry said, "I understand you were Emily's best friend." "Yes," she said in a teeny voice. "We've been friends for about 4 years." "That's a long time. Did you meet in school?" "Uh-huh. We had a bunch of classes together. Health and calculus, and some art classes too. But Emily was a lot better than me when it came to art." "How often did you see her?" "Every day, at least in class." "And did she tell you what her plans were for the future?" "She wanted to go to college and learn to be a better painter." "Did you know Emily when she began to date Chris?" Heather nodded. "She was dating Chris when I met her. They were always together." "Always?" "Well, one time sophomore year, they broke up for a couple of months. Chris was seeing someone else, and Emily got really upset about it." "So there wasn't always perfect harmony between them?" "No," Heather looked down. "But they did get back together." Barry smiled sadly. "Yes, so they did. Can you tell me, Heather, what Emily was like this November? Her personality?" "She was usually pretty quiet. She always had been. But she certainly wasn't, crying all the time or saying she was going to herself. She was just acting like Emily and hanging around with her boyfriend. That's why..." Her voice trailed off, and her eyes, for the first time during her testimony, drifted toward Chris. "That's why it was such a shock to hear what happened." Next section. Jordan smiled engagingly at Heather Burns. She was a little sparrow of a girl with brown hair hanging midway down her back and a silver ring on every finger. "Heather, thank you for being here. I know this is difficult," he said, and then he grinned. "But at least it gets you out of school." Heather giggled, warming toward the defense attorney, looking nowhere near as close to fainting as she had a minute before. "You saw Emily every day in school," he said. "How about outside of school?" "Not so much," Heather said. "You didn't run into her at the Gap? Or the movies on the weekends?" "No." "You didn't make plans to go hang out together?" "Hardly ever," she said. "It wasn't that I didn't want to, but Emily was always with Chris." "So even though you were her best friend, you didn't really see her often outside of school?" "I was her best girlfriend," Heather admitted, "but Chris knew her better than anyone else." "Did you see Chris and Emily together?" "Yes." "What was their relationship like?" Heather's eyes clouded. "I used to think it was really romantic," she said. "I mean, they'd been together forever, and it was sometimes like they couldn't hear anything but each other's voices, or see anything but each other's faces." She bit her lip. "I used to think that Emily had what all of us wanted." Jordan nodded gravely. "And Heather, based on the relationship you saw between Chris and Emily, can you picture him ever hurting her?" "Objection," Barry called. "Overruled." At Jordan's nod, Heather looked directly at Chris, her eyes wide and liquid. "No," she whispered. "I can't." "So, let's talk about it." So they've just brought in Emily's best girlfriend, Heather Burns, from school. Jordan is asking her, can you see Chris hurting Emily? Can you see him physically hurting her in any way? Jordan presents the question. And she's trying not to cry, and she's like, "No, I can't." So, the trial is a heating up. Melanie Gold's up, y'all. Here we go. Here we motherfucking go. Melanie Gold was wearing black on the witness stand with her hair pulled back severely and the padded shoulders of her suit jacket stretched wide. She looked like an implacable mother superior, or maybe even an archangel. "Miss Gold," Barry said, laying a hand over her witnesses. "Thank you for being here. I'm so sorry to put you through this formality, but I need a few facts for the record. Could you state your name?" "Melanie Gold." "What was your relationship to the victim?" Melanie stared directly at the jury. "I was her mother," she said softly. "Can you tell us about your relationship with your daughter?" Melanie nodded. "We spent a lot of time together." She began to talk. Her words brush strokes, bringing Emily back to life with the same artistic elegance that Emily had possessed. She would spend time with me after school, when I was at the library working. We'd go shopping together on the weekends. She knew she could turn to me. What sorts of things did Emily talk to you about? Melanie started and directed her attention back to the prosecutor. We'd been discussing college a lot. She was getting ready to apply. What were her feelings about going to college? She was very excited, Melanie said. She was a wonderful student and an even better artist. As a matter of fact, she was applying at the Sorbonne. Wow, Barry said. That's impressive. So was Emily, Melanie said. When did you first find out that something had happened to Emily? Melanie wilted in the chair. We were called in the middle of the night and told to come down to the hospital right away. All we knew was that Emily had gone on a date with Chris. By the time we got there, Emily had died. What were you told about the death? Not very much. My husband went in to identify Emily. I couldn't, and then Michael came back out and told me that she'd been shot in the head. What did you think, Miss Gold? Barry asked gently. I thought, oh my God, who did this to my baby? The stillness that comes on the heels of true grief settled over the courtroom, so that the jury could hear the scratch of Jordan's pen, the tick of the bailiff's watch, Chris's labored breathing. Did you ever think for a moment, Miss Gold, that it might have been a suicide? No, Melanie said, her voice firm. My daughter was not. How do you know? How wouldn't I know? I'm her mother. She wasn't sad. She wasn't depressed. She wasn't crying. She was the same wonderful young woman we'd always known. And she'd never used a gun in her life. She didn't know anything about them. Why would she have tried to shoot herself with one? Did a jeweler start calling you after Emily's death? Yes, Melanie said. At first, I didn't know who it was. The woman just kept asking for Emily, and it seemed like a bad joke. Oh, that's awful. When you got somebody calling for somebody that's no longer with us, oh, that's awful. Okay. At first, I didn't know who it was. The woman just kept asking for Emily, and it seemed like a bad joke. But then, she finally told me about a watch that Emily had bought for Chris, and I went down to pick it up. It was a $500 watch, $50 more than she'd made the entire summer working at a camp. Emily knew we would have been very upset to find out that she'd spent that amount of money on a surprise birthday gift for Chris. It was far too extravagant, and we would have made her return it. She took a deep breath and then continued. After I went to the jeweler's, I took that watch home and I realized it was Emily's way of telling me to look more closely at what had happened. She stared at the jury. Why would Emily have bought a watch to give to Chris at the end of November if she knew they were going to kill themselves before then? Barry walked toward the defense table. As you know, Miss Gold, the only other person at the carousel that night was Christopher Hart. Melanie's eyes flicked over him. I know. Do you know the defendant well? Yes, Melanie said. Chris and Emily grew up together. We've lived next door to his family for 18 years. Her voice thickened, and she glanced away. He was always welcome in our house. He was like a son to us. And you know that he's here because he's charged with murder? The murder of your daughter? Yes. Do you believe that Chris could have been violent towards your daughter? Objection, Jordan said. The witness is biased. Biased? Barry sputtered. The woman's child is dead and buried. She can have any bias she pleases. Puckett rubbed his temples. The prosecution has the right to put on any witness it wishes. We'll give Miss Gold the benefit of the doubt. Barry turned back toward Melanie. Do you believe, she repeated, that Chris could have been violent towards your daughter? Melanie cleared her throat. I think he killed her. Objection, Jordan yelled. Overruled. You think he killed her, Barry restated, letting Melanie's words settle, a gauntlet thrown. Why? For a moment, Melanie stared at Chris. Because my daughter was pregnant, she spat out, forgetting the prosecutor's warning to stay calm. Melanie's about to lose her shit. Because my daughter was pregnant, she spat out, forgetting the prosecutor's warning to stay calm. Chris was going off to college. He didn't want his career and his education and swimming future ruined by some baby and a hometown girl. Melanie saw Chris startle, then began to shake. Ah, shit, here we go. Chris was the one who knew about guns, she said tightly. His father had his own arsenal. They were hunting all the time. She pinned Chris with her gaze, her words solely for him, so she is glaring at Chris right now. Melanie, Emily's mom, she's given him the death stare. You put 2 bullets in the gun. Jordan leaped to his feet. Objection! You thought the whole thing out, but you couldn't keep her from bruising when she fought you. She is losing it. Let's keep going. But you couldn't keep her from bruising when she fought you. Objection, Your Honor, this is inappropriate. Melanie stared at Chris, unstoppable. You couldn't guarantee the angle of the bullet, and you couldn't do a thing about the watch, because you didn't even know about it. Her hands flexed on the railing of the witness stand, knuckles white. Miss Gold, the judge interrupted. You killed her, Melanie shouted. You killed my baby, and you killed your baby. Mrs. Gold, you will cease immediately, Puckett yelled, banging his gavel. Miss Delaney, control your client. Order! Order in my courtroom! The tips of Chris's ears were flaming red. He shrank down beside Jordan. Your witness, Barry said, offering up the sobbing, heart-sick woman. Your Honor, Jordan said tightly, perhaps we should take a short recess. Puckett glared at the prosecutor. Perhaps we should, he said. Next section. Now Jordan's about to question Melanie. Let's just pause here. What do we think is about to happen? Put it in the comments. How is this gonna go? Jordan, Chris Lawyer, is about to question Melanie, Emily's mom, on the witness stand. We're about to find out. When Melanie took the stand again, her eyes were red and high flags of color. Her eyes were red and high flags of color rose on her cheekbones. But for all intents and purposes, she was again composed. It sounds like Emily was quite a daughter, Miss Gold, Jordan said, still seated at the defense table, as casual as if he'd invited the woman over for lunch. Talented, beautiful, and she confided in you. What else could you possibly want in a child? Life. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh at that. It's just, the dynamics of this is cracking me up. All right. What else could you possibly want in a child? Life, Melanie said coldly. Momentarily flustered, Jordan hadn't expected her to be quite so sharp. He mentally took a step back. How many hours a week did you spend with Emily, Miss Gold? Well, I worked 3 days a week, and Emily was in school. So, I'd say 2 hours at night on weeknights, maybe more on weekends. How much time did she spend with Chris? Quite a lot. Could you be more specific? More than 2 hours at night, and some extra on weekends? Yes. So she spent more time in Chris's company than in yours? Yes. I see. Did Emily have high expectations for her future? Surprised at the change of topic, Melanie nodded. Very. You must have been very supportive parents. We were. We certainly praised academic success and helped her further her interest in art. Would you say it was important to Emily to meet your expectations? I think so. She knew we were proud of her. Jordan nodded. And you said that Emily confided in you as well. Absolutely. I've got to tell you, Miss Gold, he said. I'm a little bit jealous. He turned to the jury, inviting them into confidence. I've got a 13-year-old son. So he's looking at the jury now. He's like, I've got a 13-year-old son, and it's not that easy to keep the lines of communication open. Maybe you don't make yourself available to listen, Melanie said sarcastically. Ah, so that's what you did those 2 hours every weeknight? Make yourself available to listen to whatever Emily had to say? Yes, she told me everything. Jordan leaned against the jury box. Did she tell you that she was pregnant? This is great. Okay. Melanie's lips pressed together. No, she said. In her 11 weeks of pregnancy, during all those heart-to-hearts, she never mentioned it to you? I said no. Why didn't she tell you? Melanie smoothed the fabric of her skirt. I don't know, she said softly. Might she have thought that being pregnant would mean not living up to your very high expectations of her? That she might that she might not be able to become an artist or even go to college? Maybe, Melanie said. Might she have been so upset about not meeting your expectations, about not being the perfect daughter anymore, that she was too afraid to tell you? Melanie shook her head, tears coming easily now. I need an answer, Miss Gold, Jordan said gently. No, she said. She would have told me. But you just told us she didn't, Jordan pointed out. And Emily isn't here to answer for her reasons. So let's look at the facts. You're saying that Emily was so close to you, she told you everything. But her pregnancy, she didn't tell you about that. If she hid something that important from you, isn't it possible that she could have hidden other things as well? For example, the fact that she was thinking of killing herself? Melanie covered her face with her hands. No, she murmured. Isn't it possible that the pregnancy triggered the suicidal feelings? That if she couldn't live up to your expectations, she didn't want to live? The blame squarely set on Melanie's shoulders, she began to crumble. She sank in the witness stand, curling into herself, the same way she had when she'd first found out that her daughter had died. Jordan, realizing he could not push any further without looking bad, walked toward the witness stand and put his hand on Melanie's arm. Mrs. Gold, he said, handing her his own handkerchief. Ma'am, allow me. She took the paisley cloth and wiped at her face while Jordan continued to pat her on the shoulder. I'm very sorry to upset you like this, and I know how devastating it must be to even consider these possibilities, but I do need you to answer me for the record. With a supreme effort of will, Melanie drew herself upright. She wiped at her nose and tucked Jordan's handkerchief into her clenched fist. I'm sorry, she said with dignity. I'll be all right now. Jordan nodded. Miss Gold, he said, isn't it possible that Emily's pregnancy was what caused her to feel suicidal? No, Melanie said firmly, in a voice that carried. I know the kind of relationship my daughter and I had, Mr. McAfee, and I know that Emily would have told me everything, in spite of the lies that you're trying to spread. She would have told me if something was bothering her. If she didn't tell me, it was because she wasn't upset about it, or perhaps she didn't even know for certain herself that she was going to have a baby. Jordan tipped his head to the side. If she didn't know about the baby, Mrs. Gold, then how could she tell Chris? Melanie shrugged. Maybe she didn't. You're saying he might not have known she was pregnant. That's correct. Then why, Jordan asked, would he want to kill her? There was a stir in the courtroom as Melanie got off the stand. She walked slowly down the center aisle, escorted by a bailiff. As soon as the doors closed behind her, a volley of questions and comments broke out among the gallery, as pervasive and quick as the spread of a fever. Chris was smiling as Jordan took his seat again. That, he said, was awesome. Glad you liked it, Jordan said, smoothing his tie. What happens next? Jordan opened his mouth to tell Chris, but Barry did it for him. Your Honor, she said, the prosecution rests. Now, Jordan murmured to his client, we put on a show. And that's where we're going to end today's reading. Ah! What do you guys think? Who are your favorite characters? Who do you relate to? What do you think is about to happen? Put it in the comments. If you want to keep watching, I will link the next book club video up here for you, so you can click on that if you want to keep watching. I love you guys. I love that you enjoy this as much as I do. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Tap the like and subscribe buttons and have a wonderful day.
How y'all feel out there? I'm light years, call me eons. When the snare kick in, the beat is neon. Lights, yeah, I'm feeling magnificent. Care less what I'm up against.